how good is Kawhi Leonard actually?
When you make a list of the best players in the sport, there's not too many names you get to before Kawhi Leonard, yes?
Absolutely. I mean, and this may sound crazy, but Kawhi Leonard reminds me of Michael Jordan.
And then to top it off, you look at this season alone, right? Kawhi Leonard gets hurt, he goes down. Most of the time when you see a guy go down and your team is in the heat of the battle and they're in the playoffs, they not in the suite wiggling their toes, eating steak and shrimp. They down there on the bench encouraging their teammates.
And I have said, if Kawhi Leonard in 2.5, 3 months is holding up a trophy, is holding up the championship trophy, he's a top 10 player in the league all time. I'm going to say it today. He's a top 5 player.
Oh, my God.
He's a top 5 player of all time.
We forget about the Kawhi Leonard hype at the peak of his powers, for real. Because I remember post-2019, everyone damn near unanimously said he's the best player in the league. I swear that was the conversation. But revising that year, now we want to reintroduce Giannis into the conversation. What about Steph? What about KD? The gap wasn't that big that year between Kawhi and everyone else. But I vividly remember post that finals run, everyone saying Kawhi was the best in the world. I vividly remember the hype the Clippers had when Kawhi Leonard, after the season that he just had, and Paul George in the season that he just had, teamed up with the Clippers, and that team having super team conversations. Is this team a super team? Because on top of that, they had 2 Six-Man of the Year candidates, had a great season the prior season relative to the talent that they had, and added Kawhi Leonard and Paul George.
Steve Ballmer and the Los Angeles Clippers should force Kawhi Leonard to retire.
Wow.
I'm done. He needs to go home. Okay? It's over.
All right, man. This summer really made me realize how strange of a legacy the great Kawhi Leonard actually has. 4 years ago, I did a video basically with this exact same theme about Kawhi, and 4 years later, his legacy has somehow gotten even more confusing. We recently just witnessed the Olympics where Team USA brought home the gold, and this one was special because it had so much aura. LeBron named this team the Avengers, and it felt that way because the league's big three for the past decade all came together and agreed to get this one mission done one last time, and that they did. But initially, this was supposed to be the big four doing this, but right on time, Kawhi got hurt, and we got Derek White instead. Now, it never really made that much sense for Kawhi to even play to begin with because we know he needs his rest. But this big four would have been special truly because these are the four that dominated our era of hoops. If you look at the 2010s, the only players that have multiple championships in that decade is LeBron with 3, Steph with 3, and KD and Kawhi share 2.
I'm gonna throw Russell Westbrook in there. I'm gonna throw James Harden in there. I really wish James Harden didn't fall off as hard as he did because I think it would have been fun to have James Harden on that Team USA team. Same thing with Russell Westbrook too. If he just, you know what I'm saying, extended his career just a little bit longer, it would have been fun, but not everyone can have LeBron, Curry, KD longevity. So I don't blame him.
Mention he beat LeBron and Steph in the process of getting those rings. Kawhi's legacy should hold way more weight than it does, but it just feels like it doesn't. One thing about all-time greats and how they become all-time greats is they normally have the numbers, the all-time numbers to some extent to enhance their legacy. Kevin Durant, even through all of his injuries, he's 10th currently in all-time scoring, and I believe he can retire in that top 5 spot. Stephen Curry, the greatest shooter ever, he's way ahead of anybody with the most threes in the history of the sport, and he damn near has 9 of the top 20 three-point shooting seasons ever. I mean, his is just undeniable. And LeBron, numbers-wise, all-time legacy-wise, we don't even have to speak on it. My point is, looking back at Kawhi's legacy 20 years from now is going to be the strangest thing ever because he doesn't have any of this.
I think Kawhi Leonard's legacy is the perfect litmus test as to how much you care about peak performance and career accolades, right? And even that, I think Kawhi Leonard questions that because Kawhi does have career accolades. Like, he does have 2 rings. He does have a finals MVP. I believe he has 1 or 2 DPOYs. So he has like career accomplishments that other greats just don't have. But one thing I've definitely noticed about just how people have conversations when it comes to comparing all-time players is that careers and what they do in their careers truly don't matter as much as we say they do. Because when I ask you, yo, who's better, LeBron or Michael Jordan? 2009 LeBron is a completely different LeBron from 2024 LeBron is a completely different LeBron from 2014 LeBron, right? Same thing with Michael Jordan. 80s Michael Jordan is completely different from early 90s Michael Jordan is completely different from late 90s Michael Jordan. But I feel like when we have these conversations, I think what we're inherently saying, and we just don't want to say it, is at the peak of their powers. Same thing with Shaquille O'Neal. Let's introduce Shaquille O'Neal into this discussion. Let's be honest, we're not talking about 92 Shaquille O'Neal. We're not talking about 96 Shaquille O'Neal when we bring this up. We're not talking about 07 Shaquille O'Neal. We're talking about LA Lakers 2000s three-peat Shaquille O'Neal. That's really what we're talking about, right? So when it comes to Kawhi Leonard, when I tell you, yo, who's better all time, greater all time, KD or Kawhi, I'm sorry. I think truly the conversation, just depending on who you talk to, does become an accolades conversation, an accolades heavy conversation, or just a peak heavy conversation. That's ultimately what a lot of these conversations boil down to.
We speak right now. Do you know where Kawhi, one of the greatest pure three-level scorers that I've ever seen, do you know where he ranks in all-time scoring? He's 204th. He's actually going to have one of those legacies where you just had to be there in real time to truly appreciate how great he really was. Stephen A. Smith recently said something about Kawhi that can sound excessive, and it probably was, but it does hold some weight, and I'll explain.
The brother is a big-time basketball player. Jay, this is not a discussion about his skills and how elite he is. This is the worst superstar. I can make a case this is the worst superstar in the history of sports. He is a nightmare.
I'll shortly get to the good/confusing part of Kawhi, but I really want to break down this comment. Calling Kawhi the worst superstar ever sounds strange, illogical, and damn near like a paradox, because in one breath you're calling him a superstar, and that's not given to just anybody, but you're calling him the worst one yet. But one thing I noticed about Kawhi's legacy when you really dive into it is how consistently unreliable he's been in some of his team's biggest moments, and that does favor Stephen A's point.
It does, but even if we really want to talk about the worst superstars ever, and we're talking about availability, I'm sorry, Derrick Rose exists. I'm sorry. Derrick Rose won MVP in 2011. He was a superstar in that season. He was the future of Chicago, and he was never the same. Much worse than Kawhi Leonard. And there's other superstars I can name that I don't want to sound like I'm hating. I'm gonna say Carmelo Anthony. Where they were probably more reliable, but they just didn't peak at Kawhi levels. So again, it does go back to, are we talking about peak? Like what exactly are we talking about here?
Even if you look at his championships and how great he may have been in those championships, his performances were really unexpected and honestly surprising. In 2014, when they won, Kawhi wasn't even drafted to really be an offensive force. In his draft reports, one of his biggest weaknesses was him not really having a true, reliable offensive skill set. He worked extremely hard with San Antonio's coach Chip Engelland, perfected his shot, and became the Kawhi that we know now. But prior to that finals, nobody really expected Kawhi to be the finals MVP, in which he was and he deserved, but he did it kind of quietly and out of nowhere. To me, kind of the same thing in 2019 when Kawhi won it out from San Antonio. Let's be real, they were petty and they were trying to punish him. They sent him way to Canada. That was not on his list. Nobody really expected Toronto to win that championship. In fact, more people were talking about what he was going to do afterwards. He just happened to have one of the most special playoff runs that I can remember, and we kind of forgot how great Kawhi truly was. He reminded us in the most Kawhi way possible. But what about when expectations were truly there? When he's the known superstar, he's favored, and he's picked to win. Unfortunately, that's when Kawhi's been the most unreliable. It really sucks because sometimes it's really out of your control. But the best ability is always going to be availability, and that's never really been his forte.
My main thing in this discussion is like people trying to weirdly blame Kawhi for all of this because yes, he's unreliable, and this can even extend to Joel Embiid. Yes, he's unreliable, but I don't think it's in Kawhi's prerogative. I don't think Kawhi is the type of dude, and I don't know him personally, to just pretend he's injured. I'm pretty sure this is a guy that wants to compete and play out there. However, I will say this, I think from a fan perspective, in terms of expectations on a team with Kawhi Leonard or with a Joel Embiid, at a certain point in time, I am just tired of hearing the injuries excuse. I mean, they weren't healthy. And honestly, valid criticism. It is unfortunate that is the case. But my thing is that argument is used a lot to discredit the team who actually won said series or won said championship. This team would have won it if Kawhi was healthy. This team would have made it this far if Embiid was healthy. Like, when is he ever, though? You know what I'm saying? Like, when is he ever? That's my biggest problem with the whole injury conversation.
Kawhi was that known dude, established himself in 2016, 2017, won back-to-back DPOYs, and at this point was easily a top 5 player in the sport. In those back-to-back years with healthy young Kawhi, look at how dominant San Antonio truly was. They were only second to Golden State with wins, and they were the only 2 teams well into the thousands as far as point differential. They were dominant. You can see why Coach Pop was damn near chasing Kawhi around the country to keep this man on his team. When he's there and healthy, he wins. But of course, when you're playing that well, that raises your team's expectations. That gets your fans' hopes up. You really can't do that with Kawhi. In 2017, in which was supposed to be the showdown of the West, the 2 best teams in the West, Zaza hurt Kawhi, and that's not his fault at all. But unfortunately, it does add to his legacy of never being there when needed most. If this was like a one-off incident, it would be different. But for Kawhi, it's really a pattern. San Antonio predictably got swept. The following year,
come on. I won't even bring that up because, again, that is out of Kawhi's control. Trying to do a fadeaway, motherfucker landed in his landing spot and I tweaked my ankle. I mean, that's Mick. Everything else afterwards, like, my thing is, if it truly is a freak injury, I can't. Like, it's not a pattern. Like, we saw what caused an injury, and like, oh God, like, what the fuck do you want me to do? But if there is a repeated pattern of non-contact injuries, that's when things do get really concerning for me. But the Zaza one, nah, I can't roll, man. Not too much on that.
Kawhi's last year with the Spurs, he was basically gone for that whole season. That was the Spurs' last real year to really contend, because afterwards Tony was gone, and so was Manu, and even so was Kawhi. The Clipper Saga with Kawhi is really the era that favors Stephen A's point. Let's be real. Paul George, he's in Philly now, not because of Steve Ballmer, not really because of a contract dispute. To me, it's none of that. It's because Kawhi Leonard just couldn't stay healthy. The Clippers being the Clippers.
I don't know why he go to Philly if that was really the problem. I think legitimately Joel Embiid is Kawhi East, for real. For better or for worse. Because how dominant Joel Embiid is, you can argue it's more dominant than Kawhi. But availability is always the biggest question when it comes to not only Joel Embiid, but the teams that he's on.
They made the mistake and extended Kawhi early for some odd reason, and they didn't want to double down and keep both of them. Why? Because they've proven they're not reliable, and it's mainly because Kawhi can't stay healthy. Again, I don't understand the Kawhi thing first, but why would Steve Ballmer face second apron penalties for a duo that's proven they can't win? That Kawhi is not healthy enough. In 2020, most people, including myself, picked the Clippers to win it all. And no, it wasn't mainly because of how good Paul George was coming off an MVP year. It wasn't because of how deep the Clippers was. It wasn't because of Doc Rivers, none of that. It was mainly because Kawhi Leonard looked like the best player on the planet at that time. He's the one that made the Clippers championship opportunity look realistic. But in the bubble, their best chance to...
They had the makeup of an NBA championship team. Like, everything you were looking for, truly, they had it. Because I feel like for certain teams, a big question is, is the guy at the top good enough to lead them to a championship? We saw that with Kawhi Leonard in Toronto already, so that's not even a question, right? Top end talent. He's a top 5 talent in the league, arguably the best player in the league. And then on top of that, you also add an All-NBA forward with him in Paul George. They have depth. The pieces seem to fit. At that time, it was starting to get old, but they did have a championship caliber coach who's proven to win a championship before too. So they had the makeup of everything you wanted from a championship team. It's just the dice didn't roll in their favor, and injuries did play a really big part as to why they never won a championship.
Actually win a championship. They blew a 3-1 lead, and Kawhi just wasn't good in that Game 7. It wasn't just him, but he's the best player, and heavy is the head that wears the crown. Now, Kawhi underperforming hasn't really been the norm. In fact, that was really a rarity because Kawhi's play, that's never really been the problem. But it all ties back to the one point of Kawhi not really being reliable when the expectations are there. In 2021, another one of their best chances to actually win. It was a shortened season, the weakest competition in the West in years. And Kawhi played amazing, especially against Dallas when they were down 0-2. But Kawhi's body eventually broke down, and he missed their franchise's sole conference finals appearance. In the last 2 years, Kawhi's missed 7 of their last 11 playoff games. If you take out that Toronto run, which again was amazing, since 2017, Kawhi's missed 24 of his possible 74 playoff games. His teams, they've lost 16 of those 24 games without him, and they're 4 games above 500 with him. They win when he's there.
The annoying thing about Kawhi too is like he shows the glimpses of how good he can be in said year. Because typically what happens is Kawhi plays like, I don't know, 1 or 2 games, and it's like, oh my God, Kawhi's like going crazy. And then it's, Woj bomb. Well, not anymore, but Woj bomb, Kawhi Leonard is out for a couple games. Next thing you know, the series is over and Kawhi just doesn't play the rest of the playoffs. But we saw like how good he was in said season. It's not even like, oh, we got to look back in the regular season. He played in the playoffs. That's what really annoys me about the whole Kawhi Leonard shit. Again, not blaming Kawhi Leonard, but it's just, as a fan, it is annoying.
Perfectly segues into the confusing part of what's going to be Kawhi's legacy when he's there and how great he is when he's there. When healthy, Kawhi is undoubtedly one of the best players I've ever seen. Let's not forget, he's one of 8 perimeter players to win the Defensive Player of the Year, and he did it back-to-back. That's a big award for some odd reason. Also, he was the second player before LeBron did it right after him to win Finals MVP in 2 different conferences. And in the window in which he actually became a superstar, I'll take out last playoffs because he was visibly hurt and he only played 2 games. But in that window, look at where he ranks as far as points per game. Look at who he's behind, the other forward gods of our generation, and he plays less minutes and he's been more efficient. Literally every single year in this window, in his prime window, in the playoffs, and this is a true testament to how great you really are, his numbers always significantly increase. In elimination games, again, if you want to see how great a player is when it really matters, these are the top 5 scorers in that spot. I know I said earlier, Kawhi doesn't really have the all-time numbers to truly back up how great he is, but he definitely has the winning numbers and the when it matters most numbers. If you look at players in the history of the league that wins the most in the amount of games that Kawhi has played, he's really only behind Magic, Larry, and Magic's teammate Michael Cooper. No disrespect to Michael Cooper, but he played a lot of games with Magic, so that helps. That's who he's behind. I know he's played and been a part of great teams, but he's a proven winner. Since he joined the league, he still has the highest win percentage of any player. Even in the playoffs, amongst players that plays real minutes and they've played his amount of games, Kawhi is really only behind the Warriors dynasty and LeBron as far as win percentage. Lastly, and this really emphasizes Kawhi's greatness when he's there. Since 2016, Kawhi's 5th in 30-point playoff games. Now, out of everybody in that top 5, look at how many games he's actually played in total in comparison to the rest. This man is truly great when he's there. The problem has always been that last part, when he's there. In conclusion, I think Kawhi is going to have one of the more confusing legacies that we've ever seen. And honestly, I think he's one of the biggest what ifs ever. I know we don't put him in that category because we've seen him actually win, but how much more could he have won had he stayed a little bit healthier?
Yeah, Kawhi Leonard is going to be a litmus test for people as to what they value on all-time lists, in my opinion. If you have him high, then you must really care about peak performance. If you have him really low, then you must care about the longevity and the overall accolades of someone's career. Me personally, when I do talk all-time, I am looking at your whole body of work. So all-time, I probably would have Kevin Durant over Kawhi Leonard because of the whole body of work. But if we're talking about, who's better, like if you ask me, who's better between Kawhi Leonard and Kevin Durant, I do think that conversation is much, much closer than what, the perception is career-wise. But with that being said, shout out to Swish Out for the video. Links to Swish Out's video will be in the description down below. And I'm out of here, man. Peace.